I was carrying groceries through the lobby of Riverside Apartments when my brother stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the elevators. "We need to talk," Derek said loudly, too loudly. Mrs. Patterson from 4B paused her mailbox rummaging. The college students who just moved into 2C stopped their conversation. "Can this wait? I have ice cream melting," I said, adjusting the bags in my arms. "No, it can't wait." Derek pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. "This is an eviction notice. You have 72 hours to vacate Unit 6F. The lobby went completely silent. I stood there, grocery bags cutting into my palms, looking at the official-looking paper he was waving. "Derek, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I now own this building, and I'm implementing immediate changes, starting with removing tenants who don't pay market rate." He smiled, the same smile he'd used since childhood, when he'd gotten me in trouble. "You've been living here dirt cheap for too long, little sister. Time to face the real world." Mr. Kowalski, who'd lived in 3A for 12 years, stood in the doorway to the mailroom, watching. The young mother from the second floor had stopped halfway down the stairs. "Derek, I pay my rent on time every. You pay a fraction of what this unit is worth." He interrupted. "Did you really think that would last forever? I'm a businessman, Emma. This is business." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I recognized the pattern. My property manager, David Hutchinson, texting from his office just down the hall. I didn't look at it. "When did you buy the building?" I asked quietly. "Last week. Dad co-signed the loan." Derek turned to address our growing audience. "For those who don't know, I'm Derek Torres, the new owner of Riverside Apartments. Things are going to change around here. Better maintenance, updated amenities, professional management. No more of this slumlord nonsense." Professional management. I'd spent 6 years building this building's reputation, keeping units updated, maintaining below-market rents for long-term tenants, creating a community instead of just a revenue stream. "Derek, you can't just." "I can, and I am. It's in the purchase agreement." Dad reviewed everything with me. He waved the eviction notice again. 72 hours, Emma. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Mrs. Patterson spoke up. "Young man, you can't evict someone with 72 hours notice. That's not legal." Derek turned to her with exaggerated patience. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but I've consulted with attorneys. My sister has been essentially squatting here, taking advantage of family connections to the previous owner. That changes now." Family connections to the previous owner. I almost laughed. The door to the building manager's office opened. David Hutchinson stepped out, his tablet in hand, his expression carefully neutral. David had worked with me for 4 years. He knew exactly what was happening. "Is there a problem, Mr. Torres?" David asked. "No problem," Derek said confidently. "Just informing my sister of the new ownership structure and necessary changes." "I see." David glanced at me. I gave him the smallest shake of my head. "And you've reviewed the building's ownership documents?" "My father and I have reviewed everything. The sale was finalized last Tuesday." "Interesting." David tapped something on his tablet. "Could you step into my office for a moment? There seems to be some confusion about the chain of title." Derek laughed. "There's no confusion. I have the deed right here." He pulled another document from his jacket. "See, Derek Michael Torres, owner of Riverside Apartments, all 32 units." David looked at the paper, then at me, then back at Derek. "Mr. Torres, that's a quitclaim deed." "Right. Which makes me the owner." "A quitclaim deed transfers whatever interest the grantor has in the property. It doesn't create ownership if the grantor didn't own the property to begin with." The lobby had gone silent again. Mrs. Patterson moved closer, interested now. Derek's confidence wavered slightly. "My father owned this building. He transferred it to me." "Your father," David said carefully, "has never owned this building." "That's ridiculous. He's owned it for years." "He's the one who." Derek stopped, looking confused. "He told me he bought it in 2019. Mr. Torres, I've been the property manager here since 2021. I've never dealt with your father as the owner." I set my grocery bags down on the lobby's seating area bench. The ice cream could wait. Derek's face was reddening. "Then who did you deal with? Who signed your paychecks?" David didn't answer. He looked at me. "David," I said quietly, "could you pull up the ownership records, please?" "Of course, Miss Torres." David turned his tablet around, displaying a digital copy of the property deed. Riverside Apartments, purchased August 2019, for $2.4 million, by Emma Catherine Torres. Would you like me to show the mortgage documents as well? The lobby exploded into murmurs. Derek stared at the screen. That's not possible. It's quite possible, David said. Miss Torres has owned this property for 6 years. I have the title insurance, the tax records, the bank statements. No. Derek shook his head. No, Dad said. What did Dad say exactly? I asked. Derek looked at me, and for the first time uncertainty crossed his face. He said the family owned a building, that he was managing it, that he wanted to transfer it to me so I could finally have a real business opportunity. Dad doesn't own this building. He never did. But the deed is worthless. David finished. You can't deed property you don't own. Mrs. Patterson laughed, a short bark of amusement. Oh honey, you tried to evict the actual landlord. Derek's hands clenched around his fake deed. This is some kind of scam. Dad showed me bank statements, rental income, maintenance expenses. He's been managing this place for years. He's been helping me, I said. I hired him as an assistant property manager in 2020 when he lost his job. He handles small maintenance issues, coordinates with vendors sometimes. He gets paid $2,000 a month. No, he told me. Derek's voice rose. He showed me everything. The income statements, the tenant files, everything. He had access to those files because I gave him access. He's an employee, Derek, not an owner. The college student from 2C whispered to his roommate, not quietly enough. Dude, this is insane. Derek turned on David. You're part of this. You're helping her lie about Mr. Torres. David interrupted, his voice hard now. I'm going to need you to leave the premises. You're disturbing the residents. I'm disturbing. I own this building. You don't. And if you don't leave voluntarily, I'll call the police for trespassing. Derek looked around the lobby, at the neighbors watching with various expressions of shock and amusement, at David standing firm with his tablet, at me standing quietly, next to my melting groceries. Emma, this is insane. Why would I what? Let you believe Dad owned this place? I didn't. Dad knew the truth. He's been cashing paychecks with my signature on them for 5 years. But why wouldn't you tell the family? I picked up my grocery bags, because every time I tried to talk about my work, about my investments, about anything real in my life, you all laughed. Remember Thanksgiving 3 years ago when I mentioned I was looking into real estate? You told me I should focus on realistic goals, and stop pretending to be a businesswoman. Derek opened his mouth, then closed it. You told your friends I was a professional renter. I continued. Mom introduced me to her book club, as her daughter who still hasn't found her path. Dad told Uncle Robert, I was figuring things out when I'd already owned this building for 2 years. We didn't know, because I stopped trying to tell you. I shifted the grocery bags. I bought this building with money I saved from my software job. I got a commercial loan, renovated the units myself over 3 years, built it into something profitable, and I hired Dad when he needed work, because he's my father, and I thought he'd be trustworthy. Mr. Kowalski spoke up from the mailroom doorway. Emma fixed my water heater herself last winter, came up at 11 p.m. on a Saturday, because the emergency line went to her personal phone. She approved my emotional support dog, even though the old lease said no pets. The young mother on the stairs added, didn't charge me extra or anything. Derek looked around at the tenants, then back at me. You've been this whole time. Yes. And Dad apparently decided to pretend he owned what he managed. I started walking toward the elevator. David, can you handle this? Already calling your attorney, David said, his phone to his ear. And your father. I stopped. Dad's coming here? He called about an hour ago, asking when the new owner would be visiting. Said he wanted to make sure the transition went smoothly. Derek's face went pale. He really thought. He told me you'd understand, that you'd be happy for me, that this was keeping it in the family. The elevator arrived. I stepped in, bags and all. Emma, wait. David will explain the legal situation, I said, as the doors started closing. You can pick up your belongings from the lobby. You're trespassing on private property. The last thing I saw before the doors shut was Derek standing in the lobby, fake deed hanging from his hand, surrounded by my tenants. who knew exactly who their landlord was. In my apartment, I put away the groceries, the ice cream had survived, and checked my phone. 7 missed calls from Dad. 12 texts ranging from "we need to talk" to "this is a misunderstanding. Don't do anything rash." 3 texts from Mom. "Your father says there's a problem with the building. Derek is very upset. Why didn't you tell us you owned property?" 2 from my sister Lauren. "WTF Emma. Dad said you humiliated Derek." I was typing a response when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Dad standing in the hallway, still wearing his maintenance polo shirt with Riverside Apartments staff embroidered on it. I opened the door. "Emma, sweetheart, this is all a huge misunderstanding." He started immediately. "I never told Derek he could. You showed him financial records and told him you owned the building." "I said the family had an interest in the building. I meant we all benefit from." "You forged a quitclaim deed, Dad." He had the decency to look ashamed. "I didn't forge it. I filled one out. I thought maybe, if Derek believed he had ownership, he'd take initiative, be more responsible. It was supposed to motivate him. By letting him try to evict me, I didn't think he'd actually." Dad ran his hand through his hair. "He's been struggling, Emma. The business failed. His wife left. He needed something to believe in. So you gave him my building." "Not really gave. I just let him think." Dad trailed off. "This sounds bad when I say it out loud. It sounds like fraud, Dad, which is what my attorney called it 20 minutes ago." His face went white. "You called your attorney?" "David did. Standard procedure when someone attempts to illegally evict the property owner." "Emma, please. He's your brother. I'm your father. Can't we just what? Pretend this didn't happen? Let Derek believe he can take whatever he wants, because the family will cover for him." Dad sat down heavily in my hallway. "I've made a mess of this." "Yes you have. What are you going to do?" I looked at my father, this man who'd worked for me for 5 years without telling anyone in the family that his daughter was his boss. This man who'd let me be dismissed as directionless and unsuccessful at every family gathering, while depositing paychecks I signed. "I'm going to terminate your employment, effective immediately," I said. "David will mail your final paycheck, and I'm going to send a cease and desist letter to Derek regarding the fraudulent deed and attempted eviction, Emma. And I'm going to ask you both to not contact me for a while. I need to think about what family actually means." Dad stood up slowly. "Your mother is going to be devastated. Mom didn't notice I owned a building for 6 years, Dad. I don't think she'll notice I'm taking some space now." He nodded, defeated, and walked to the elevator. I closed my door and leaned against it. My phone buzzed. "David, your father just left. Derek is still in the lobby. He's asking if he can talk to you." I texted back, "No, if he's still there in 10 minutes, call the police." Another buzz. "Mrs. Patterson, honey, I made extra lasagna. I'm leaving it by your door." Today was a lot. I smiled despite everything. The building settled into its evening sounds around me. Footsteps upstairs, television through thin walls, the elevator humming. My building. The place I'd built when my family thought I was just drifting through life. Another text, this time from Lauren. "Mom says you fired Dad and kicked Derek out. What is happening?" I looked at the message for a long moment, then typed, "Ask Dad. He has all the details." Then I silenced my phone, heated up Mrs. Patterson's lasagna, and pulled up the architectural plans for the building expansion I'd been planning. The family would keep calling. Derek would probably try to salvage his pride with some story about misunderstandings. Dad would attempt damage control. But for now, in apartment 6F of the building I'd owned since I was 25 years old, I ate lasagna and planned my next investment property. The elevator dinged in the hallway. Heavy footsteps. A knock at my door. Through the peephole. David, holding a folder. I opened the door. "Police removed Derek from the premises," he said. "No charges filed, per your instruction, but he's officially trespassed. Building security has his photo." "Good. Also, your attorney called. She's drafting everything we discussed. Should be ready by tomorrow." He paused. "Your father left his building keys and access cards on my desk." "Thank you, David. One more thing." He handed me the folder. "Lease renewal for Unit 6F. Your rent hasn't increased in 6 years. Market rate for this unit is now $2,400. You're paying $950. I looked at the renewal form, with my name in the tenant field. As property manager, David continued, I'm required to recommend market rate adjustments. And as owner, he smiled. As owner, you can tell the property manager that long-term tenants who maintain their units impeccably and respond to emergencies at 11 p.m. deserve consideration for their loyalty. I signed the lease renewal at $950 per month. Good decision, David said. Also, I'm giving you a rent increase notice. What? He grinned. Just kidding. But your family is probably going to keep showing up. Should I add them to the trespass list? Or do you want to handle that case by case? Case by case. For now. He nodded and left. I locked the door, looked around my apartment, my home in my building, and finally felt the weight of the day settle. My phone lit up with another call from Mom. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to my tenants. Dear Riverside residents, you may have witnessed some confusion in the lobby today regarding building ownership. I want to clarify. I am Emma Torres, and I have owned Riverside Apartments since 2019. David Hutchinson remains your property manager. Nothing about your leases, rent, or building operations will change. Outside my window, the city lights reflected off the river. My building stood solid beneath me. 32 units of people living their lives, unaware that their quiet landlord, in 6F, had just reclaimed her story from a family that never bothered to ask.